After Iowa's caucus-goers behaved exactly as predicted, it would surprise absolutely no one if New Hampshire Republicans give Donald Trump a big win.
If you look at Iowa, nobody knew we were going to blow it out like that. I think a similar thing's going to happen here.
What is unpredictable these days is the entire rest of the world. Iran and Pakistan fighting, Houthis attacking ships, and Americans retaliating, and on and on and on. It's a lot for any president to handle, especially one who is 81 years old. Next.
This is Washington Week with The Atlantic. Corporate funding provided by Consumer Cellular. Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewan through the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson. Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves. Robert and Susan Rosenbaum. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Once again from Washington, Editor-in-Chief of The Atlantic and moderator, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Good evening and welcome to Washington Week. After Donald Trump's win in Iowa, more Republicans are coalescing around the former president. Unless something completely surprising happens in the coming weeks, Trump will be the GOP nominee. We're a long way from January 7th, 2021, when Republicans expressed horror at his behavior a day earlier. Here to discuss with me the state of American politics and also the state of the world are Eugene Daniels, a White House correspondent for Politico and a co-author of Politico's Playbook, Adam Harris, my colleague and a staff writer at The Atlantic. Asma Khalid is a White House correspondent for NPR and a contributor at ABC News. And Nancy Youssef is the national security correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our freezing studio. People don't know this at home, but it's actually 40 degrees below zero right now. So we're very, very primed for sharp insight.
Talk about Iowa.
We're going to talk about Iowa. We're doing this and New Hampshire. Right. There's no Hawaii primary that we ever get to cover. It's amazing. All right. So Iowa. Eugene, let's start with you. What are we supposed to think after Iowa? Like it's done?
We're supposed to think, duh, right?
Yeah.
Like what you said is exactly right. It's like what we saw happen in Iowa is exactly what you would expect, right? He is not running Donald Trump as like this insurgent. He talks like an insurgent, but he's not. He's running as an incumbent, right? So we're going to probably end up with two incumbents running against each other in November. And so when you talk to voters in Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina or anywhere, if they believe, and most of them do, that he did not lose the 2020 election, why would they think he's a loser, right? So the argument that Ron DeSantis and sometimes Nikki Haley say is when they talk about, we need to move past the losers in the party, we need to win again, why would they believe that if actually what they believe is that the 2020 election was stolen from him? And so Iowa showed us that. It showed us how dominant he is. It also kind of, I think, took a lot of wind out of the sails for both Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley.
Ron DeSantis didn't have a lot of wind.
No, not out of his face.
To be fair to wind, he didn't have a lot of it.
No.
But Nikki Haley, so I want to get to Nikki Haley in a minute. But Adam, Asma, anything surprising at all in the results there?
No, I think it went exactly the way that we expected it to go. I mean, if you think about what this primary has been, it's been people trying to catch up to Trump's poll numbers. Mm-hmm. So from the beginning, it has been he was the leader of this sort of horse race, and everyone was trying to build some form of base that would support them, whether that was college-educated voters, whether that was folks who were in that never Trump bucket, right? Mm-hmm. But his base has always been the sort of base of the party, right? Since he was elected in 2016, it was firmly, he's had a pretty firm grasp on the party. He's been indicted several times over, and he still has the support of the party. And so I don't think that the results in Iowa.
And something you said just reminded me that like an incredible proportion of the people who voted in Iowa, went to the caucus in Iowa, believed that the election was stolen. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I mean, Asma, it's kind of like an uphill battle for any reality-based candidate.
I mean, when you look at that, when you look at someone like Asa Hutchinson or Chris Christie, both of them men who actually did take on.
Asa Mania is formally over.
And it is over. That's the point, right? Like neither one of those candidates actually had any longevity. And then you look at someone like Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. His argument was essentially that he was kind of Trump light, and voters saw that and they were like, no, we want the original, right? And so ultimately,
We like Coke, not Diet Coke.
and so ultimately,
You can
that's
call
what
them
they
Coke
wanted.
Zero, but it still doesn't taste like Coke.
Yeah, indictments are not. I mean, I think like voters saw that Republican
Well,
voters
indictments
and said,
indictments make the Coke taste even cokier, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in a certain kind of way. Well, I want to talk about Nikki Haley. Let me stay with you, Asma, for a second. Like, what does Nikki Haley have to do in New Hampshire next week in order for people who follow politics to go, oh, huh? Like a kind of a Howard Dean kind of thing. Like, oh, maybe she really could do this. How well does she have to do?
I mean, I think she has to do exceedingly well. People have talked about
Like
her
actually
coming.
win?
In my view, yes,
That
right?
ain't
I
gonna
mean, and I
happen.
don't think that's going to happen. Some folks have talked about losing in single digits. Now, my argument about why I don't think that's convincing is that then you look at where the primaries go. It goes to South Carolina, a state that is much more demographically similar to a voter base of Republicans like Iowa. You know, folks talk about New Hampshire being this independent, somewhat libertarian-minded state, but I think what they've forgotten is 2016, when I remember being there, that's a state Donald Trump won. He did very well in, so I think it's somewhat foolhardy to think that Nikki Haley is going to be more attractive to many Republican voters who actually gave Trump his first primary victory in 2016.
You know what I find so interesting about that viewpoint is, I wonder then, is there any opportunity of this being a two-man race or one-man, one-woman race? And if she has to win, if the idea of 2 or 3, 4 or 5 percentage points is not on the table, is there a scenario where former President Trump faces competition where there's a real threat to his candidacy, or is there inevitability that could come out of New Hampshire?
I mean, I also don't know if there is a two-man race. Like people say, if Ron DeSantis drops out, the assumption is that all of his voters would go to Nikki Haley, and I don't really buy that assumption,
why assume that?
right? And so therefore, I've always thought this idea of a two-person race doesn't necessarily disadvantage Donald Trump.
So Adam, what are the chances that we get to Super Tuesday and there's only one candidate? I mean, it's not zero.
No, it's not out of the question, and particularly after a convincing win in Iowa, right? If he has a convincing win in New Hampshire, followed up by South Carolina, which, as Asma mentioned, right, it's very demographically
Nikki Haley has to
similar.
win South
She
Carolina.
has to win South
obviously, and
Carolina.
She's
and
probably
she
not
doesn't.
going to,
Exactly.
putting in the numbers.
But it does. It feels like there is an air of inevitability around it.
And the thing about New Hampshire is that it is uniquely tailored for someone like Nikki Haley, right? In demographics, right? If she can't win in New Hampshire, where can she win?
Why?
Because you have much more highly educated people. She tends to do better with those kind of folks. You have a little bit more diversity than Iowa, but not much. But the kinds of people that she's been talking to, right? These kind of middle of the road Republicans, people who used to be the mainstream of the party, but are now kind of on the outskirts and are technically the fringes because they're not Trump Republicans. A lot of them live there. It's also an open primary, so you have Democrats who are up because they're not playing in the Biden Dean Phillips lane. They're probably going to vote on Tuesday in the New Hampshire primary, and a lot of those folks are going to vote for her. If she does not win there, then what that says is she can't win really anywhere else because most of the other states are very Trump-like.
You just, by the way, discovered the new slogan for New Hampshire. Way more diverse than Iowa. It's on, well, speaking of diversity, good transition, right? Speaking of diversity, let's talk for a minute, Adam, Nancy, about Trump's approach to Nikki Haley. He's going back to the kind of the OG playbook, right? Birtherism. He's saying that Nikki Haley can't run. There's nothing in the Constitution that says this, but because her parents are from another country, and he's calling her by her birth name, an Indian name, and also mangling it. This has caused some newspapers that can't keep up with the times calling this racially charged as opposed to what it is, which is racist. Yeah. But is this stuff still work? I mean, is this what the base wants?
To Trump's mind, yes. This is. I mean, it's firmly within his playbook. If you go back to his sort of roots in New York real estate, right, with housing discrimination against Black people, you think about birtherism. You think about him calling Ted Cruz Raphael during the last primary cycle, and so this is a thing that he believes is animating towards his base to other another candidate to say, hey, we are trying to make America great again. When was America great? When America was led in a more monolithically colored way.
It's putting Nikki Haley, Nancy, in this kind of, she doesn't seem comfortable fighting him or calling him out for straight up racism. She's very, very, very tentative around all these race questions.
Well, what I found so interesting in her approaches. On the one hand, she's trying to gain Trump supporters, gain Trump voters. She's done things say she would pardon him if convicted, and at the same time say, I'm a different candidate. I'm trying to delineate myself from him. And yet and in that vein, she hasn't gone after him directly on this issue. One where you think she could, because her story has been so intertwined with her upbringing and having to live in a world of racism and between a black and white culture. And we haven't seen her sort of utilize that experience, which she's done in the past, to really point out how one would argue that these ideas are outdated and are not part or shouldn't be part of this election.
Instead, she's saying that this was never a racist country, right? That's the thing about Nikki Haley, and Vivek Ramaswamy had this, Tim Scott as well in the Republican Party in this primary, is that they are people of color tangling with and trying to win the nomination of a party that does not want to have a fulsome conversation about race, right? When you think about the last couple of years and how the Republican Party has kind of waged war against critical race theory or fulsome conversations about race. Don't teach our kids like this. Don't make white kids feel uncomfortable about what their ancestors did. There's no world in which someone like Nikki Haley can do anything but what she's doing, which is really struggling and kind of failing, I think, to talk about race in kind of this more patriotic way, right? When she's saying that this country, it was never racist. You can say, Republicans say this all the time, that it's not a racist country anymore. We've moved past that. But saying it was never a racist country is completely wrong.
So what you're saying is that Nikki Haley and maybe Ramaswamy and Tim Scott and others, Marco Rubio, maybe they understand that in order to win in this Republican Party, they have to downplay their own ethnic, racial background. I mean, in other words, that pivot that the Republicans were supposed to have made 8 years ago toward party of universal opportunity, that didn't.
Well, and the thing is, they don't try to downplay their backgrounds. You have Tim Scott saying, we went from cotton to Congress in several generations. So they try to play up their backgrounds.
Their individual backgrounds. But not the larger question.
Right. Yeah, it sort of tries to place a realm of individuality on what has been a sort of systemic system of racism. So that they say that there's no systemic racism because, I, a single individual, am able to overcome
what's interesting about it is that it's the Trump playbook is an open playbook. It's been there for years. He's going to it. It still works. It's kind of like, there's this kind of Back to the Future feeling right now around these questions in particular. But let's go to the vice presidential sweepstakes for just a minute. I want to get to the Houthis, things of actual paramount importance. But let's talk about the vice president for a minute, because Nikki Haley was talked about as a possible vice president. Probably not anymore. I want to play. I want to play the what I think of now as the audition video of Elise Stonic, and I want you to talk about that for a minute.
Calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign.
Yeah, so that was, Claudine Gay inadvertently, and those other two university presidents inadvertently brought Elise Stonic a level of fame that she didn't previously have, and also drew the attention of Donald Trump. More to the point, he is said to have called her a killer, which is obviously a compliment.
He likes winners.
And he likes winners, and she got two of the three university presidents who were, admittedly remarkably inept in their testimony. She got their heads. They both resigned. So is she in the front row of this? Or is she in the front of the line because of that?
Yeah, I think she certainly is in the front line. She's also been rather successful, I think, as a lawmaker, doing well in terms of winning her district year after year. She doesn't have any real electoral losses to her name. I think the one big question mark was she wasn't always loyal to Trump at the outset. He loves loyalty, and so will he be forgiving of her past? I don't know. I think she's making certainly a strong case.
Is it hers to lose?
I think so. There are a lot of names that get thrown around, right? It depends on what he's looking for. He's going to look for someone who's completely loyal, and not just loyal like Mike Pence was, right? When Mike Pence was loyal to him for that whole 4 years, just that one day that Trump's really pissed off about. But someone like Elise Stonic seems more likely to do the opposite of what Mike Pence did, right? And so that is something that he's going to be thinking
what do you mean?
about.
You mean that she would not certify an election that Donald Trump didn't want certified?
She has dodged that question when folks have asked her that. And so she is that is her auditioning further to tell Donald Trump, wink, wink, nod, nod, I have your back no matter what, and I'm on your side. And you can see that as she's going. There's people like Kristi Noem of South Dakota who's on that list. Nikki Haley seems to have maybe torched her chances. I think he's someone who's going to want someone out of central casting who kind of looks like a stereotypical Tim Scott, someone who looks like a vice president in his mind. And so there are a lot of names, but I think at this point, Elise Stonic is at the top of that list.
It seems like it could be her. I mean, raises a larger question of, and you brought this up. Donald Trump made it pretty clear that he didn't care if his previous vice president lived or died on January 6th. So it's kind of a dangerous job to take.
Yes.
But why would anybody want that job? I mean, do you want that job?
Let me know
ahead of time.
I like the Atlantic.
Yeah.
When you think about the folks who are auditioning for that job, the folks who may potentially be in that position, you think about Elise Stonic, you think about Tim Scott. These are people who are effectively saying that I have bought into the sort of Donald Trump ethos of the Republican Party. I am willing to sort of, if there's something that I disagree with, I'm just going to sort of be quiet about it. You don't necessarily see Tim Scott out there, negatively talking about Donald Trump. You didn't see him talk negatively about Donald Trump during his own campaign. It was something he was sort of, routinely quiet about. And so, if we move forward and Nikki Haley is sort of out of the running, I do think that,
it is almost definitely going to have to be someone who Donald Trump believes will do what he needs done in a constitutional crisis, in an election.
Ambition is why they would take the job.
What is interesting, it's not sort of traditional things that we look for in a vice president, someone to help you with a state or a certain demographic. And yet, it still is the position that can catapult you to be the future leader of the party. So it's so interesting to me, the dynamics that are still in play and the ones that aren't as much, at least in
Donald
this
Trump
case.
is the dominant Republican. He's 77 years old. Whoever gets the slot
is next. And also I think one, it's ambition, right? So all of these people want to be the future of the party because there is going to be a post-Trump party, whether that's in 4 years or whether that's in one. But you also never think the lion's going to eat your face, right? Like that, they are unlikely to think that Donald Trump is going to do to them what they saw him do to
Mike Pence provided a alternate roadmap, a map of where not to go.
Exactly. So don't do that in your
right. Nancy, let's go to the rest of the world. Let's go to the rest of the world. And my first question for you is, okay, so Pakistan and Iran are suddenly attacking each other, and we did not have that one on the bingo card. Is it a blip and a burst, and it's not something that the American administration is going to pay attention to, or is this just a sign of decomposition and destabilization across the greater Middle East?
So I'll tell you what I thought was really interesting, that you saw those strikes and counterstrikes between Pakistan and Iran. And in the 24-hour period around that, we saw Iran conduct strikes by its military in Iraq and in Syria, 3 countries in a 24-hour period. Remember that Iran historically has used proxies in places like Gaza, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and in Pakistan. And so to me, what was interesting, this week we saw a much more aggressive Iran coming forward with its own military to assert itself. Some of that I think was for domestic politics. Some of that was to sort of position itself in the region as a voice and a state that has to be reckoned with. Some of it was what it saw as self-defense. In the case of Pakistan, what we saw almost immediately was an effort to de-escalate. I think what we saw from both nations was an effort to say, we're not going to tolerate these kinds of strikes on our borders, but we're also not looking to escalate. And so you saw diplomatic efforts almost immediately after the strike by Iran and the counterstrike by Pakistan.
I mean, Iran is busy right now in Lebanon, Gaza, and the Houthis. I want to come to the Houthis really quick.
But they're not at the front line. They're not at the front face of all that.
No, but they got to pay attention to this, especially with the Houthis, who seem uncontrollable. I mean, they're a proxy that's very hard to get a handle on. But I want to ask you this, and then join the rest. The interesting thing to me about the Houthis right now is Elliot Cohen, writing in The Atlantic, made this point. He called the American strikes against the Houthis, he called it therapeutic bombing. which I thought was an interesting expression. It's like, it's bombing designed to make us feel like we're doing something. We, the Americans, are doing something, but it's not enough. It's obviously not stopping the Houthis. They seem to be pretty filled with vinegar about the whole thing. So the question is, as we move into this fateful year for America, American national security, American foreign policy, are we going to be in June, July, August still talking about the Biden administration's inability to get the Houthi situation under control?
I think potentially. The thing is, remember, the Houthis have been in a war for a decade with the Saudis and have not been put down. Their capabilities are vast. While the U.S. has done at least 6 strikes since January 11th, that in and of itself isn't going to be able to stop them from being a threat to ships transiting. Now, they could be less of a threat, have less radar, less launchers to do those strikes over time. But if the U.S. is not looking to escalate and face a potential direct conflict with Iran, who's the Houthi backers, and at the same time it wants to put down the strikes, I don't think this is something that can be solved strictly through military strikes. I think the key country is actually not the U.S., but China. If we start to see China speak up and say, look, your strikes are hurting our ship's ability, our economy, because we can't transit through the Red Sea, then I think we see an impact. We saw a little sign of that this week when China said to publicly, we need you to sort of clamp it down. They're not willing to work with the U.S. so far, but they are signaling that this potentially hurts our economy. So when I think about putting down the Houthis, I don't think this is within just U.S. military capability. It has to be some of countries like China coming forward and say, this is hurting us, and therefore we need you to stop conducting these strikes.
Right. So here's like a big looming question. You know, Biden's fighting with Netanyahu now about about the two-state solution and about the actions in Gaza. You've got the Houthi situation, of course, and managing the Saudis is a huge challenge for any American administration, for Biden especially. You've got North Korea being especially bellicose sounding. China's talking about, I mean, it's interesting how, no. What's interesting is how for the last couple of years, Ukraine now falls into this like category in this middle category. But here's the key Ukraine question. If Russia starts gaining territory back, or starts going on the offense against Ukraine, even taking a few square kilometers, you could see a narrative develop that, wow, Joe Biden doesn't really have a handle on the way the world is going. And so the question is, could this be, you cover the White House. I mean, how worried are they that the world seems to be spinning a little bit too much out of control? Worried for the world's sake, worried for national security's sake, but also worried politically.
I think as it relates to the Israel-Gaza conflict, you do hear a degree of optimism from them that the fighting will move to a less intense phase, more humanitarian aid will be able to get in, and that the conflict will look different. Maybe some hostages will come out in a ceasefire. They seem optimistic about that. But to your point, I think, to me, this is bigger than what's going on specifically in Gaza, which is President Biden, he gave a very prominent foreign policy speech before he ever took office during the campaign. And his pitch was essentially that America was back, that American leadership was going to be back on the world stage in a way that it, in his view, was not there during Donald Trump. And you're seeing that. I mean, I was striking to hear you talk about China being the country in this moment who could potentially alleviate tensions, because that's really not where the United States is at this point. And I think that there is a question about America's reliability if Congress can't particularly provide this funding for Ukraine. Then where does Europe look?
So, go ahead.
I think that's such a good point. And he also said that the U.S. would be the defenders of democracy. And here in Ukraine, you're seeing that fight. To me, it could go one of two ways, in that you could argue that the world is so unstable right now and conflict in so many places, and that the Biden administration is not handling it well. You could also argue that because the world is so complex and there are so many conflicts going on and they're so nuanced, you need somebody with decades of experience to manage it. So it seems to me, if you're a voter, I think that's the question you're asking yourself.
But Adam, I somehow don't think that Donald Trump is going to take the position just articulated by Nancy that, Donald Trump is going to say, hey, look, Joe Biden, he's an old guy and he can't handle all this.
Well, one of the first things, a couple of days ago, maybe about a week ago, Trump actually said on the campaign trail, right, I am first president in years and years that didn't have any wars, right? So, and to voters, are they going to go back and check that? Are they going to read the Snopes or Washington Post fact check? Is his base actually going to be?
I mean, if there's a meme on TikTok, then they will definitely go check it, but I'm not so confident that they're going to fact check it. But no, Eugene, in the last seconds that we have left, I mean, can you imagine? It's very rare that an election hinges on foreign policy, but can you imagine this one?
Yeah, absolutely. We wrote in Playbook months ago, not to shake our shoulders, but we did say that this could be one of the first foreign policy elections that we've ever had because of what's going on. And Donald Trump and Biden have such stark, different views of the world in ways that we haven't seen in a really long time.
Well, it's very interesting. I could talk all night about this, but we can't, because it's a television show, and I have to say that we're going to leave it here for now. And I want to thank our panelists for a great discussion, for sharing all of their reporting and insight. For more on The Atlantic's coverage of the Republican presidential race, be sure to check out theatlantic.com. And on PBS News Weekend tomorrow, why air travel costs so much. I'm Jeffrey Goldberg. Good night from Washington.
Corporate funding for Washington Week with The Atlantic is provided by
Consumer Cellular, this is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
you get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewan through the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.